Our final speaker in this session, he is going to talk about my view of industry from education, and that's George Edwards, founder of Gas Sense Solutions Limited.
Thank
Over
you.
to you, John.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So I just wanted to talk to you briefly today. There we go. There we are. Right. So as I say, my name's George Edwards. I'm a student at the King's School, Canterbury, so I'm studying for my A-levels this year. And as part of that, I'm fortunate enough to be able to study engineering as an A-level. And through that, I have a piece of coursework I have to complete, which I did last year, the remit of which is very vague and open-ended, and it's to design and make a product. So I did that last year and came up with a solution, and the product I wanted to design was a system for monitoring the amount of gas in a gas bottle for people in off-grid homes, caravans and yachts that cook off gas, which I did last year. I was sort of pleased with the result. The technology was suitably novel, so it's now patented, and there's been some sort of venture capital interest and some licensing requests. So I'm now exploring the commercial side of that and trying to bring that to fruition. But in my experience of starting to look at that and going to factories and contract manufacturers, it's become quite apparent that there's an awful lot that I don't know, and that my sort of education has been in some way inadequate in preparing me for industry and my experiences in that. And I've been quite sort of reflective about it and wanted to talk to you briefly today about some of the things that's thrown up. So firstly, I wanted to talk about why I think schools are an important place to target, and the kind of why I think that's an important area for outreach, and some of the issues with how technical subjects are dealt with at school. I want to look at the current perception of my generation of industry and why that's problematic, the existing outreach, and the way that this problem is sort of currently tackled, and some of my suggestions and reflections on different approaches we could take and a potential shift in focus for some of that. So firstly, in terms of schools, engineering sort of happens at schools a bit. It's certainly touched on. But it's, I think that schools are very important in this. That everyone sort of is aware that there's a shortage of engineers coming through into industry, and it's been spoken about many times today. But there's no issue filling courses on engineering degrees. They're hugely oversubscribed, they're very popular. But the issue is that everyone that goes into them wants to be an IP solicitor or an investment banker. Which means that we're putting the wrong people onto the engineering courses because they're not then going into industry. So it needs to look at the step before that, and that's schools. And the slide up here shows the number of people sitting sort of technical subjects at schools. Maths, we have 700,000, physics about 150,000, and then engineering is 2,000, which, to put that in perspective, is 200 more than Irish. And when the British engineering industry is worth twice the GDP of Ireland, that seems to be quite a worrying disparity. So I thought I'd flag that up. Not only are not very many people taking it, but I think the way that technical subjects are dealt with at schools is very limiting and is sort of slightly problematic. This is just a picture that I think demonstrates it quite well. The briefs that people are given and the projects and the opportunities that people are given tend to remove any sort of opportunity for intellectual thought, innovation, and sort of genuine design, usually because of the restrictions placed on schools, the time and costs. There's very, very little design to be done, and it's sort of jumping through hoops and all quite artificial. The other idea there is to design a car. You'll see there's not an awful lot of variation between them. In terms of the current educational outreach, there are an enormous number of bodies that are focusing on it and aiming at schools. This is far, far more than any other subject. And having been on the receiving end of most of the propaganda that's spread out by these people, I genuinely couldn't tell you what I'm supposed to know, what I'm supposed to think about a career in engineering. There are no clear messages coming across other than we need engineers. And realistically, people aren't going to do engineering because the country needs more engineers. That sort of holistic approach, unfortunately, isn't a reflection of human nature. They're going to do engineering because they're going to earn lots of money, or because they're going to have a stable career, they're going to get to travel, it's going to be interesting and diverse, whatever it happens to be. But none of that comes across. There's a very vague and confused message which shouts a lot but doesn't seem to have very much substance. So I would put that sort of challenge forth, whether that marketing is right. Instead, what does come across is a lot of quite negative headlines. You know, we're often told that we need 250 million graduates in the next 3 weeks, and that, you know, no women in the whole world do engineering, and all these sort of problems that are thrown up by the press. And the kind of, you know, the reflection of that is very negative. And that's not the right sort of atmosphere we want to be spreading around engineering and industry. And again, you know, people won't do. That's not what's going to make people become engineers. And the flip side of that is that when we're trying to encourage women into engineering by saying that there are no women that do engineering, when reading that, I'd be very, very surprised if women think, you know, gosh, what an opportunity. The thought process is more likely to be, maybe it's a bit weird, I'll have another think about it, which, you know, is completely counterproductive. So this is an example of an advertising campaign I wanted to pull up. Now, this is for the National Science and Engineering Competition, which is run every year. And I think it's a fantastic event. You know, Rolls-Royce and BAE are all companies that go there. Shell, lots and lots of big companies representing excellence. And they have a number of competitions, and it's an opportunity for students from around the country to exhibit their work. And I think it's a great example of what can be done for outreach. But this was the advertising campaign run for this event this year, which is Ugly Animals. Vote for your favourite ugly animal, which is a marketing idea, sort of works because ugly animals are quite sort of, striking. So when they're put around social media, that's okay, and there's a call to engage people. But that works quite well as a sort of fluffy Blue Peter way to engage 10-year-olds. But the issue there is at a fair when you've got Rolls-Royce jet engines, and full-size planes and Project Bloodhound, 10-year-olds don't care about that. They want to go and go to L'Oreal and make their little vial of perfume, and go and buy sweets. So the issue there is when the marketing is confused and not very closely linked up with what is a fantastic event. So the competitors find the marketing patronising and the right people aren't going there to take opportunity of the event. And I think it's a good event. I don't mean to criticise it at all, but that was just quite a good reflection of some of the outreach that comes across. So here's a slide that is quite important to me. I'll be very surprised if anyone in the room can name every single member on here, although I'm sure you'll get a few. So James Dyson, a very influential British designer. Next along, Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet, probably the most influential person in our modern era, and is British. The next one along, Nick's my age. He invented an app called Sumly. After his GCSEs, was quite frustrated with the way we browsed the internet, had an interest in coding, so started writing an app, attracted some venture capital funding, and then sold it out to Yahoo for an obscene amount of money. Bottom left-hand corner is, for me, the most important person on this slide. Mark Koska is personally responsible for saving the lives of 60 million people, which is the population of England, and no one knows who he is. When he was a year older than I am now, he went on a gap year and travelled India and was horrified when he saw the sort of in the slums of India and the scrap heaps, 10-year-olds rummaging through the rubbish, looking for syringes and needles because they could wash them out and sell them back to the hospitals for use. So then when people were coming to hospital, putting their faith in the hospitals that would be given an adequate service to be made better, they were in fact being infected by AIDS and dying. His response to that, rather than becoming very upset or doing a sponsored charity run, which is great but only so effective, he invented a novel syringe which is single use and breaks after one use, and most importantly, it's the same price as a normal syringe. Licenses that technology to a number of factories and has saved so many lives and will continue to do so. And I think that really strongly emphasises why people need to be encouraged to think in a pragmatic way and need to be familiar with technology because of the benefits it has to the economy and to society and humanity as a whole. And the last two, unfortunately, aren't British, but are another two people who've been involved in technology, Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates with Facebook and Microsoft. And were both engaged at a very young age. I think Mark Zuckerberg's important because he's a geeky programmer, fundamentally, who did something quite cool with Facebook, and there's a film made about it, and everyone's aware of it. And I think that's been hugely influential in encouraging children to program in technology. And I think that emphasises my point, which is that the most effective marketing is peer-led, where there are people that we're trying to communicate can engage with and relate to, and that's what will inspire them into it, rather than just telling them that they should. So that's some of my reflections on what goes on at the moment. This is my challenge to put out what I would really like, and I think a pragmatic way to go forward. Imagine a Britain, the British economy and British society and British manufacturing, if there are 100 James Dysons in the country. It would be hugely different, noticeably. And I think that's where we need to be aiming. And my proposal for how we could aim towards this would be that there are sort of about 100 companies represented at this event over the 2 days, I think. If every single one went away, found their nearest sort of technically competent school, and engaged with them, and the first step would just be to invite their head of science, head of engineering, whatever it happens to be over, and show them around the factory, and throw them a few projects, give them some projects, preferably real things. The outcome may well not be useful, but a real product, something for them to get involved with that they can engage with, and then find an engineer to sort of follow the project through with them, and that only needs to be, an hour, 3 times across the course of the project. But the person that's chosen needs to be right. They need to be preferably quite young, inspirational, and having done something useful. And in doing that, you've just created a massive network of 100 sort of technological hubs. And I reckon that most schools have someone quite brilliant that comes through them, even if it's once a decade. And if that person can be encouraged into engineering rather than physics or maths, because there's a competent and thriving subject there, and given the tools and the experience that they're shown in industry, and given an exciting project to engage with, and then helped with the technical facilities available and the industry contacts to do something pragmatic and useful, I think that would be phenomenal. And that would be my call to industry, that if that could be brought about, that would be very, very meaningful. And that's what I really want. So, that's all I particularly wanted to say today. If there's anyone here who either has current outreach programs similarly to that, or is considering doing so, please do come and talk to me. I'd love to discuss it further with you. And thank you very much.
I think George finished with a fantastic question. How many of us want to engage with school and help them to develop technical projects? Personally, I've done that a few years ago, but I would like to put this in the survey as well, if we could, please. So how many of you want to engage with school? Yes and no. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now